Hello and welcome to the CX Files for May 16th, 2024. My name is Mark Hillary and I'm back in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
And I'm Peter Ryan. Usually, as everybody knows, I'm based in Montreal, Quebec. But Mark, today on the 16th of May, I could not be happier to be in Manchester in the United Kingdom, where I am going to be speaking at an event put on by the CCMA. Looking forward to talking to a great number of CX decision makers in the north of England, and always great to be back on this side of the pond, especially after a whirlwind at CX outsourcers.
Well, it's always great to get back to Manchester. Fantastic music history, and well, it's just a great place to visit, except for the weather. But I'm hoping to be back there next month, actually.
Well, we will have barely missed each other as always. It seems these days when we travel to the UK, you and me, we seem to be like ships in the night, barely, almost coming into contact, but never actually seeing each other. Look, at the end of the day, Manchester has a storied history when it comes to all elements of the economy, of industry, and now services. This is an incredibly services-based city. I'm always delighted to be able to come back to this part of the world. And Mark, you will recall a few years ago, you, myself, our pal Stephen Lloyd, and a few others had the opportunity to spend some time in Manchester. We actually went out to Salford to see Martin Fry from ABC. And I seem to recall you being very strategic, putting a comment on Twitter, tagging him on it, letting him know you were going to be in the audience. And you got a shout out from the stage, which I think probably was a big thrill of a lifetime.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. And I think that was back in the days when Twitter used to be a lot of fun. It's definitely changed a lot there these days.
Yeah, I won't even comment on Twitter, but that trip was quite a lot of fun. And over the years, we've had the chance to visit Manchester as well as a number of other places that have been host to some incredible music shows, that have been host to a number of very fun and funky festivals. And I think maybe it's time that we pivot the discussion away from the fun that we've had in the United Kingdom towards maybe sunnier destinations, and that is the country of Barbados, because we were lucky enough to do an interview with Sean Wiltshire, who is the founder of one of Barbados' homegrown BPO contact center operations, the Contact Hub. And it was a great chat with Sean. You might recall meeting her at CX Outsourcers in Atlanta, Mark. She was there in full force. And the Contact Hub and Sean's story, it's so inspiring just to see an entrepreneur who's started on the front lines of CX, which Sean did as a student, and to be able to really take the reins, take the harness, the bull by the horns, whatever cliche you want to use, and to say, this is a great industry. I'd like to be a part of it, but I'd like to be an entrepreneur in this industry. It's more something that we're hearing more and more about, and I think Sean is emblematic of this.
Yeah, that's a great story. I think that we're clearly seeing many more opportunities opening up in this industry. And whether that's the entrepreneurial path of creating your own BPO, or just becoming a more senior manager within the company that you operate within, or other pathways into sales, marketing, technology. There
Yeah.
definitely doesn't seem to be. There used to be this stereotype of it as a kind of dead end job, but now there really is clearly some identifiable opportunities for people with customer service experience.
Exactly. You took the words out of my mouth. And I think the key for more progressive or oriented organizations is the fact that what they try and do is not just provide people with some phony Moroni flow chart that says if you start as an agent, you're going to end up as a CEO. I mean, we all know that that's highly unlikely that somebody is going to start on the front lines on the telephones or doing digital support and end up as a CEO of a company. It can happen. We all know people who it has happened to. But the reality is, I think that the smart organizations are trying to find out from individuals who are starting on the front lines, okay, well, as you progress in the organization, as you get experience, as you get seniority, what would you like to do? Is it operations management? Is it communications? Is it marketing? As you say, is it sales and business development? There's all sorts of different pathways. And I think I look back at the interview that we did with Sean, one of the things that comes out to me is that she found a niche. She found things within the scope of CX that she really enjoyed doing, and she's been able to parlay that into a career and founding a business that's now employing people in Barbados. Barbados is an up and coming destination. It's becoming more and more pertinent and relevant on the scene when it comes to offshoring and nearshoring. It's got great feel for both North American end users as well as those in the United Kingdom, potentially even further afield in other English-speaking parts of the world. And it's great to see that there is a homegrown success story like Sean's and the Contact Hub that can bring it to the forefront.
Yeah, and it's great just to hear another Caribbean success story because for so many years we've just kind of seen these destinations as driven by tourism or offshore banking or just the kind of limited industries that don't give a lot of local opportunities, and now we're seeing services really develop.
Exactly. And I think that we can always agree that places like Barbados or most places in the Caribbean are going to be driven heavily by tourism, but there's diversification happening and economic diversification on the back of business services or frontline consumer services is always good news. So let's, without further ado, go to our interview with Sean Wiltshire and find out a little bit more about her story and what she's doing to shake things up in the world of CX and BPO in Barbados. The CX Files this week is going international once again. We've had an amazing group of people who have joined us on the podcast over the course of the past several years from a variety of different countries. But today marks the first time we have had somebody join us from Barbados. I'd like to welcome Sean Wiltshire, who is the Director of Strategy and Operations at the Contact Hub. She joins us from her home in Barbados. Sean, great to talk to you today.
Nice to talk to you, Peter. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, the pleasure is all ours, and thanks for taking some time to spend the next 20 minutes to half an hour talking a little bit about yourself, talking a little bit about Barbados, about the Contact Hub. For full disclosure, you and I connected on a podcast that was organized, or a webinar, sorry, maybe about 2-3 months ago, that was organized by Invest Barbados. And I'm always on the lookout for people who've got what I consider to be interesting or amazing stories, journeys in our space. And when I started hearing a little bit about how you got involved in CX and in BPO, certainly that ticked those boxes. So I was so delighted when you agreed to be a guest on the CX Files. So I'd like to start out, Sean, by talking to you a little bit about your own background in our industry. When I heard a little bit when we connected the first time about how you got involved in CX and BPO, I was fascinated, and I'm sure that our listeners will be as well. So maybe just kick off the discussion by giving a bit of a history to yourself, how you got involved in customer experience, and we can then dive a little bit further in terms of where that journey has taken you.
Sure, not a problem. I'll try to make my long story short as much as I can. Um, Simply because I have almost 20 years of experience in BPO and customer experience at this point. So I started basically at a local technology company here in Barbados. Very young in an administrative role. I was actually the secretary for the sales team for that company, and that company did IT. So starting there with a typewriter, I have to say, don't mind to age me. So the typewriter. Um, I did eventually grow in the organization and grow into branding and sales management positions to the point where I think when I left that company, I was managing, I think it was 8 sales people at that point, all selling HP computers back then. Yeah. In that experience, I basically got my hands into technology, was very hands-on with the sale of computers and technology, etc. So I spent 9 years at that company. It's just left me with an understanding of IT, business, operations, the whole works. So when I left that company, I joined a global events company. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Peter, when I said say no idea, I absolutely had no idea. I think on the third day at that company, I went into the bathroom and said, God, please help me. It was that sort of thing. So, but going into it and being brave, I mean, it grew my research skills. I learned and I understood. I discovered Google. This was 2001. I discovered Google and learned, how to do so many things at that organization. And basically, I worked with global Fortune 500 companies across North America, and some European companies that were really focused on um, IT. So I did like CIO conferences, CISO conferences, so, and over that 5 years, I moved from producing the events to actually managing producers and eventually full event teams. So this really broadened my horizons. I got into quite a bit of international business and business practice, as I said, grew my research skills. And then from there, I went back to my previous employer for a very short period as a marketing manager. And then I went on to the UK to pursue my master's in international marketing and entrepreneurship at the University of Essex in the UK. So this is where I gained my first contact center experience. See, I told you it wasn't a short story.
It's all good. It all goes somewhere.
Yeah, yeah. So I actually I was studying, and of course you're studying, you need to earn money. And I applied and I got a job at Lloyd's TSB, their contact center, and I worked weekends and holidays and did customer service. I picked up the phone and well, it was all inbound. You didn't actually pick up the phone, but the calls came in and I help people, people stranded without money, people in, all types of places losing their cards, fraud, the works. So that's how I got into the industry.
That's
And then,
fantastic.
yeah, so that's how it originally started.
That was what germinated your fascination with CX and the whole idea of contact centers. And I think it's an amazing background that you've given just all those different elements and how they tie together. And Sean, as you think about that time working in the UK, and I had the same experience when I was studying abroad too. I was living in Melbourne and I needed some extra cash, so I went to work for a telecommunications contact center doing outbound calling. And you learn a heck of a lot when you were on the telephones. You learn a heck of a lot about the people you work with. You learn about the people you're speaking to. And I personally found it one of the most fascinating part-time jobs I ever had. But thinking about yourself, what prompted you to decide getting a master's degree in marketing, getting a master's degree in the whole idea about international business, yet working in frontline customer service? How did you come to the realization that CX was something that you wanted to pursue as a career goal, as something that you wanted to spend your time doing as an entrepreneur?
I think for me it was organic in that the opportunity came because of the contact center, sorry, because of the events company I worked for previously. A contact there knew my skills and recommended me for a role that was in Barbados, and I interviewed for it while I was in London. And having finished my master's, I'm like, what shall I do? But I did interview for this role, and of course it piqued my interest. It involved people, it involved data, it involved Barbados, which was important because I'm an island girl. And that really gave me a sense of, this is definitely something I want to try. So that was the first step. Let me try this and
Mm-hmm.
see how it goes. So jumped in. I was, as I said, I was recruited in London for they're just about to open a Barbados office because they were headquartered in Boston, London, and they also had office in Tokyo at the time. So
Mhm.
opened the Barbados office, and they needed some support from a management perspective. So I came on board as the program manager for the SAP and HP teams, all focused on demand generation and lead generation. And what I found when I got there was basically so suited to my personality. Honestly, I'm a fixer by nature, and there's always something to fix in this business. Always.
Yes. Yes.
So, the fast paced, multiple project nature of the business was key for me. I generally worked on an average of like 5 projects at a time. So I'm handling five, sometimes up to 8 teams at a time. And those teams can be as big as 30 people, sometimes larger. Sometimes we had events where there was 100 people, you know, making, calling for like 3 months or whatever the case may be. So it was always busy. There was absolutely no monotony in the job. We were constantly working on new campaigns, new reports, new information to find, new problems to solve, new customers, which meant new people. Um, I always say there was never a dull moment. And I loved the job most days. There are days where you don't, but
Yeah.
most days I absolutely love the job. And that's where I developed my love for data analytics. So, in a nutshell, it really suited my personality.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. And it's interesting. I've talked to so many people who've indicated that this was not an industry that they ever thought about getting into when they were studying or when they were maybe starting out their careers. But it's something, as you say, I think organically you get into and then you don't want to leave. There's so many different aspects of it that can suit so many different personalities. And I think it's wonderful that way. So let's talk a little bit about the Contact Hub. This is your organization. This is a company that you have founded in Barbados. And I think it's just a fantastic story that I got to know a little bit when you and I chatted initially. And I'd love to find out from your own perspective, what was the impetus for founding your own BPO organization? What was really the driver behind this? And how did you get going doing it?
Oh, another long story. I'll try to keep it short.
That's all good. It's all good.
So listen, after my initial 6 years as a program manager, I then moved to an inbound contact center where the whole center was about 40 people all doing um, inbound calls, outbound calls, chat, and back end work, including including payables and credit cards and that sort of thing for an international retailer. So I did that. I just having moved. My personality is like I'm always looking for something new. So having moved there as their operations manager, I was there for 18 months before I was headhunted back to my original company to be their managing director, because the original person who had opened the office in Barbados is actually English. And he had been here for like 6 years or 7 years. And his wife is like, it's time to go home. They had even had kids that were born in Barbados. So he's like, okay, it's time to go home. Tried someone else managing the teams. It did not work out. So again, I came in as the fixer. At that point, I think it was like 130 seats. And the requirement was just to bring things back in line and that sort of thing. So I did that for about initially the first 2 years was a lot of hard work. Once we got past that, I hired additional managers. We got comfortable and everything was working as it was supposed to. I tend to train to the point where you don't need me. So I got to a point where the managers were doing well, the teams were doing well. We were doing what we needed to, and I needed an additional challenge. And there was a company that was looking for. They were a university wanted to open a call center in Barbados. So I basically consulted for them and helped them with opening up their call center in Barbados. So that was my first experience just stepping out on my own. And then from there, a friend of mine reached out to say that there was an opportunity to start a full-fledged center, and I jumped at the opportunity because I needed it at the time. I needed to grow and develop, and all those things. So we started the contact hub on a dime, literally, a loan from my mom.
Moms are
And
great like that.
yes, yeah. So and we had the fortune of falling into a building and a space that was already set up. Yeah. So we started and in 2019, and then um, we worked with international retailer, a few other companies, did quite a bit of events work, a few other things, and then COVID came along. So, but that's really, you know, the key for in terms of starting the business. I think one of the biggest things for me was how easily we were able to start this organization. How easy for me it came together, but I say how easily, but obviously from years of experience working with different companies. At one point, I even spent time researching different technologies and that sort of thing in terms of phones and teleservices, and so I actually had all the tools to make it happen. So, and then, I spent years hiring hundreds of people. So I had the tools and I had the resources. So it worked absolutely well. Sometimes I was surprised.
That's so cool.
Well, it
That's so
worked.
cool. Sean, what, in your opinion, as an entrepreneur, were the biggest surprises that you had as you were getting the Contact Hub up and running? And I'd be curious to know, from the standpoint as somebody who has been able to launch a successful business, what advice would you give to an entrepreneur, somebody who's looking to try and start up their own CX company, whether it's in Barbados or anywhere else in the world?
I think for me, my biggest surprise quote challenge with starting the Contact Hub was we started the company thinking that beyond my international clients, I could also develop a good local base in Barbados. And that didn't work. And I was so surprised by that, because that I thought that, having done it for years for these large companies and seeing how well demand generation works, and and being strategic and planning your processes and stuff, I was sure this would be perfect for local businesses. That actually didn't work. So for me, that was a big surprise. So hence why our contact center base is completely international companies. That was one. The other thing that surprised me, but it shouldn't have, but it did, was that I had to adjust my price points because I spent years working with Fortune 500 companies. So what I set as, BHRs and basic finance was up here compared to when I'm now on my own and therefore dealing with smaller companies. Then I had to adjust pricing to fit the market, and that was also one of the biggest challenges for me. Um, the other surprise was our telephony, because we sit on a VoIP system, and I always smile about it because we have the ability to call anywhere in the US at no additional rates, anywhere in the UK at no additional rates. But if we have to call Barbados or the Caribbean, it costs an arm and a leg. So for me, that was also a surprise. And I've actually been working with other Caribbean companies in the last few years trying to find a solution that would work for the Caribbean as effectively as our current telephony solution works for the US and the UK. So that was also a surprise. And most recently, my nicest surprise has been our ability to transition from 100% teleservices to now a major part of our business being application development. So that to me was unexpected. It wasn't planned. It's not something that I had thought of when I initially started the company. It's nowhere in our business plan, but it works and it's been growing and our clients are happy, and that really makes me very happy.
That's fantastic. Well, if it makes you happy, then you're going to want to keep doing the job, I always say. And that's good stuff. Sean, I'm going to deviate from some of the pre-planned themes that you and I had agreed upon before we got onto the podcast. I want to ask you something a little bit more close to home. And we've been hearing a lot at Ryan Strategic Advisory, as well as on the CX files, about the advantage that Barbados is bringing to the world from a CX perspective and from an outsourcing angle. Could you maybe talk in 3 to 4 points about what's driving this interest in Barbados from places like the UK or places like Canada, the US, maybe even a little bit further abroad, such as Ireland, Australia, New Zealand, the Anglosphere, so to speak?
Yeah, I know they're the set things that everyone talks about, but I think for me, what has driven my um relationship is it's actually relationships, their ability to communicate effectively and easily with my team, and I'm sure other call centers in Barbados will say the same. That our clients are very comfortable with communicating with us. They have no issues in terms of working with us from a communications perspective, and I think that helps a great deal. As one, two, of course, the location. It's good to be close enough to have those hours in the UK and also those hours in the US, whether it's Eastern straight down to Pacific. Same thing with Canada. We're just ideally located. Along with the fact that if you have to come for a visit to the center, you get to come and enjoy the sun. So that's an added benefit. Yeah.
Yeah.
So and then for me also, our people are key. Um in in my journey in this industry, what I've seen is teams that we've hired people who have known little or nothing about IT. And in 2 years, they're training people in sometimes the client's office or another location because they're so adaptable and so intelligent. They're able to take on the information that's provided, and they're actually able to grow in the roles. So I always tell the story of the young lady I hired who could not say Oracle, and we were doing an Oracle event. She was
Oh,
Ghanaian, and she always said Oracle because that's how they speak.
yeah.
And before I hired her, I said to her, I can't hire you. You need to be able to pronounce the name of the company because we are working for this company where it was like 100 people doing this event for Oracle. And she said, give me the weekend. This was a Friday. She said, give me the weekend. I was like, okay, I'll give you the weekend. She came back the Monday saying the word correctly. And she worked for the company for at least 5 years, possibly longer. And she was one of the highest performing reps in the organization. She trained people, multiple people, to exceed and, hit their targets, whatever the case may be. She was excellent. So, and that is simply from our ability to learn and grow. So I think that's also one of the key. And right now she's actually the managing director of a small finance company. So
Oh, she's done well. She's done well.
yes,
That's
yes, yes. So I'm just like, it's a matter of our education system gives us an excellent base, and it enables people to grow and learn almost anything in this world. That's why when clients come to me and they ask me, do they know? I was like, they can learn if they don't.
They can learn. Yeah,
They can
exactly.
learn. If there's one thing we do well is learn and adapt.
Yeah.
So I think those are some of the key things for me that are important and that stand out for Barbados, is that you have a team and they might start green, but they don't stay that way for very long. That's important.
That's it. The growth and the development at the individual level is just incredible. And I think that speaks volumes to how we've seen Barbados adapt and grow as a CX and BPO delivery point. So, Sean, I want to say a big thank you. It's always a pleasure catching up with you. Your discussions are just so entertaining and enriching. And I'm truly of the belief that when this podcast goes out, when it goes live, that we're going to be getting a lot of people not only downloading and listening, but wanting to catch up with you to find out a little bit more your story about the Contact Hub and about Barbados. So again, thank you so much for taking some time.
You are more than welcome, Peter. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. We really appreciate your feedback and suggestions. You can reach myself, Mark Hillary, or Peter Ryan via LinkedIn. Please also leave a rating or review on your favourite podcast provider, as that helps more people to find us. As always, we'd like to thank Chris Haig at Traction Media for the CX Files graphics. See you next week.